Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm still working on my 1/64 scale version of the car from the 1977 horror movie of the same name, so I thought I'd share something else with you in the meantime. About 20 or so years ago, I started building cars for the AWANA Grand Prix races at my church, Fellowship Baptist in Eden, North Carolina. AWANA stands for Approved Workmen Are Not Ashamed, and it's basically a Christian program designed for teaching kids biblical truths using Bible lessons, games, activities, and big annual events like the Grand Prix races. Each participant in the race would receive a car kit consisting of 4 wheels, 2 axles, and a block of wood about 7 inches long and a little less than 2 inches wide, a lot like the Boy Scouts Derby cars. The cars had to meet certain specifications to be entered into the race, such as being no more than 7 inches long, 2 3/4 inches wide, and weigh no more than 5 ounces. Each of these cars competed for design as well as speed, and although this was basically for the kids, there was also an adult division, and I entered a car just about every year. The first car I entered was my version of the Batmobile. I usually started by drawing a pattern out on paper first, then cutting it out and transferring it to the wood block. Well, this being my first car and all, I pretty much just made it up as I went along. I'm sure I drew a pattern, but it was probably on the wood itself, so I have nothing to show you of the early stages. Each year, a couple of us workers would cut out cars for the kids. We would build generic shapes like sedans and pickup trucks. Since I don't have a pattern of my Batmobile to show, I thought I'd show you some of these. Here's some old patterns we drew years ago. This was a generic NASCAR pattern that I drew. First thing we did was trace the block here on the paper and then trace the wheels with the axle slots. Once you did that, you could draw the shape you wanted inside here. Then you could actually draw your chassis, what it would look like. Everything would line up together. And then what I would do is I would fold the paper like this and take a clear clipboard like this, put it on, hold it up to the light, and then trace the fenders or the sides out. And then fold it again, hold it up to the light, and trace the insides, what you would cut out of the AWANA block. You see these dotted lines is where we cut even more out of the wood to lighten the car and make it easier to place weights where you wanted to. Usually it was best to place the weights right in front of the back axle. It's best for speed. Then you glued all 3 pieces together, then you could sand it and shape it like you wanted. We would sand them, shape them, then primer them and give them to the kids to let them finish them. We also did police car, same way. Draw it in the AWANA block. You have the outside fenders and the sides and then the chassis. You draw the police light up here. Fold the paper over and you got the 2 pieces you needed. The sides of the fenders, and then you would do the middle AWANA block, and here again the dotted lines, you see where we cut even more out to lighten the car. And here I drew the police lights and notched out the top for this to be glued in here. Glued everything together. You got this, and then you could sand it and shape it, and it was ready to primer and paint. Here we did a Hummer. With the Hummers, they were going to be a little taller than the other cars, so we planned on gluing some more wood on top of our AWANA block, and that was okay as long as you met the specifications for the height limit. And here you can see we drew the shape, and then the chassis. Then you have the 2 pieces separated. Here's the chassis. You can see on the dotted line where we cut even more out to lighten it. and then the sides. Glue it together. You've got this ready to sand and shape. We even did a Ferrari, same way. Drew the body and then drew the chassis. Make sure everything lines up. Here's the two pieces separated, the side pieces. And you can see in the middle part of the chassis, we cut even more out to lighten it. And that made it easier to weight. Glue them together, sand it, is ready to go. We even did a Lamborghini. I drew it out, then did the chassis part in here. Traced the two separate pieces, the fenders. And then here, I'm sure we probably cut more of this out to lighten it, because that looks like it would have been a fairly heavy piece of wood right there. Glued it up, and then sanded it, primered it, gave it to the kids. Most of these vehicles, we used Hot Wheels as models, or some sort of die-cast vehicle to look at when we drew them and sanded them. Here's a truck we drew out. I believe it was maybe a Chevy S10. Drew the body here, what the chassis would look like right here. And you separate the two pieces. You have the chassis, which would come out of the middle block. You can see this dotted line where we cut even more out to lighten the truck a great bit. And then here's the inner part of the bed. Then when you cut the fenders out and the sides, you glued it together, you had a right nice shaped bed in here with nice corners, and you could even cut out some wheel wells to go in there. Glue it together, sand it, you had a right nice looking little truck. And lastly, we did a Chevy van, and it was jacked up in the back. Drew the design out, and then drew what the chassis would look like in the middle. And here are the two pieces, the sides and the chassis part. Glued them together, sanded them. Had a right nice little van. I don't have any of these actual cars to show you now. They're all scattered all over the countryside, but if I ever run across one, I'll be sure and show it to you in a future video. As I said, my first car was the Batmobile. Over the past 20 years or so, DC Comics and Hollywood have given us many different designs of this car. Well, back in the early 2000s, there were a lot less designs out there. That didn't matter, though, because the best designs, in my opinion, are still the 1966 Adam West car and the 1989 Michael Keaton movie version. This was the car that had the most influence on my design. And here it is, my first AWANA car, the Batmobile. Notice I painted the axles flat black. This was to give it more of a black on black look. Also, I cut the windshield out of automotive striping tape. As a side note, since it was the Batmobile, you would think it would have been fast, but ironically it won the Turtle Award that year. Not because it moved swiftly like a mutant ninja. No, the Turtle Award was given to the overall slowest car of the race. It was very embarrassing for Batman that day. Guess that's why you never saw him driving this particular car again. I have lots more of these AWANA cars to show you. So if you'd like to see more, please hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and share this video if you have a mind to. Thanks for watching.